Hello, commentary fans. This is Mike again, and I am back for the next commentary, which, it's sort of in the spirit of things. I do these things with the movies that are sort of on my mind recently, and, to follow my trends of what I like, and, it just seems that I don't know. There's been some discussion about this movie. I've been reading a lot about it recently. Sort of how it depicts its historical characters, Lugosi in particular. Ed Wood is the movie we're going to be doing today. I take for granted, but we're are paused on the first screen of the movie. The Touchstone logo is about to appear, and we'll start this audio commentary in 3, 2, and 1. This has been one I've sort of referenced a few times. I suppose I should just get my, overall opinion out of it. And, if you don't want to listen anymore, then, turn it off. But I actually do really love this movie a lot. And, I don't know, I just, been reading, some of the discussions on some of the boards recently. There was a big thing about it on a Bela Lugosi group, and it's really a divisive movie. There are people that absolutely love it, like me, and there are people that hate it. And I just thought I'd put together a sort of defense and exploration of it. I think, if you take it for what it is, this opening sequence that we're just seeing now of Griswold coming out of the coffin to introduce the picture, the opening monologue verbatim from Plan 9 from outer space, warning us about Edward D. Wood Jr. And, seeing this, you can tell that this movie I've called it a fairy tale. And I think that's a fair enough description of it. It's hard to really just sort of dissect this in, I don't know, the right kind of way, because, obviously we are dealing with real people here, but I think this movie is really a fairy tale. It's very stylistically outlandish. You can obviously tell from this opening sequence, and I don't think it's meant to be taken as a biopic, although a lot of the detractors of the film and the people that really hate it seem to think it should be. It's also an opportunity to sort of discuss Bela Lugosi and this last period of his life. Obviously, the period with the most tragedy. He died a very tragic death, and his last few years on this earth were, there's certainly some high points about them. He did have some friends, and he did get the opportunity to do some work here, but this wasn't the high point of his life, and he was very miserable, and he had a very public confrontation with his drug problem. And, you can argue, certainly Bela Lugosi Jr. does, that this period of his life should not be romanticized at all, and that, if we're going to be real technical, that this Ed Wood wasn't such a stand-up guy. that he was sort of exploitive, a guy looking out for himself, and he sees this old and fragile man who can't quite, get back on his feet and, exploit his name. And maybe Ed Wood was that. I don't know. And really, I'm not really all that interested in the historical Ed Wood, the Edward D. Wood Jr. He, I don't know, like part of me thinks that there is some validity to the argument that Ed Wood wasn't a great guy. To Lugosi, at least, that he did sort of exploit him. But we're not really talking about the historical Ed Wood. We're talking about the fictional Ed Wood, who were just introduced here by Johnny Depp, played by Johnny Depp. This is really, you could have a lot of discussions about Johnny Depp and, how out there he is, sort of a personality all into himself. But I think this probably is his best performance. He should have gotten an Academy Award nomination for this, just like, we'll discuss that Landau eventually did. I love this opening. It just, sort of shows this play here that Ed Wood directed, and it's so out there, and I don't know, it's nonsensical and has terrible dialogue. And it just, you see Ed Wood in the background, mouthing the lines. He really goes all out there. I really love this portrayal, this conscious choice to make this Ed Wood this hopeless dreamer. What does that old queen know? She didn't even show. Sent a poster boy to do the dirty work. Bill Murray. This is a really, I don't know, underrated Bill Murray performance. I don't know. I've sort of had a sort of love-hate thing with Bill Murray. I think he's recently he's sort of just gone way too out there. I mean, it's his right, but I think the projects he's chosen are bordered on pretentious. And I think this is a nice mix of this Bill Murray sort of doing a artsy sort of project and sort of going all over a little bit over the top as this sort of flamboyantly gay guy, Bunny Breckinridge, who still appears in he appears in Plan 9 from Outer Space. We'll see later. But Bill Murray's really sort of funny in this movie. It's sort of hard to, I don't know, you look at it and you sort of wonder maybe if that is one of the cheap shots, I don't know. It's sort of, it's hard to look at some of these movies now and, just even later, you wonder how these gay characters are portrayed. But I think Bill Murray, and just, like, the whole feel of the movie, like, it's all very upbeat. These characters have their own sort of dignity. Even, like, the world in this film is pretty cruel, and it, you see, like, the people in high positions at this studio here are all very loud and, very mean-spirited. And you see Ed here, who's just so oblivious, just all walking this little triumphant smile on his face. One of the things that sort of haven't gone over yet is the black and white in this film. Uh, I really love the look of this movie. It's very clean, black and white. And sort of odd. It looks like a movie shot in the '90s. Sort of has that sort of look to it, but it's really unique. I really think it was a great choice, and obviously, the homage to the older films is, you could definitely appreciate it. But I think what it does really effectively is sort of showcase the cartoony nature of this, because this movie does have very cartoony sort of set design. I love the beginning of it, the beginning of the picture, when we see the little matinee and that old theater in the background with the rain. This movie looks like something that was filmed on a B-movie studio in some ways. Here we have the first instance of this Christine Jorgensen biopic, which eventually becomes Glenn or Glenda. Oh, that I never noticed that. The Bela Lugosi, the Death Kiss. He's got a poster for that in the background. The Death Kiss was a pretty silly movie from the early '30s that Bela's in. He's the red herring in it. It's kind of neat seeing that little Easter egg there. Most qualified director for the Christine Jorgensen story. In reality, the real Ed Wood, I don't know, I promise I wouldn't go too much into this, but the real Ed Wood, this movie excises two characters that, kind of make the story what it was. The Gordon brothers, who they were sort of amateurish agents that met with Lugosi while he was doing summer stock, and they sort of served as agent. They tried to get pictures off the ground, and Ed Wood was the roommate of Alex Gordon, I believe the gentleman's name was, and that's how Lugosi came into contact with him, and how Ed Wood, got involved with them. Of course, in this film, they want everything to be a little more theatrical, and they don't come into play here. Those Okies go for all sort of that perverted stuff. I love this guy. Mike Starr is his name, and he's in a few of these films around this time. He's really great in Dumb and Dumber. I love him here. Like, he really steals every scene he's in. So he's got that greasy little sandwich there. He seems like an actor that, sort of went away, that you don't really see all that often anymore. I think he's done some television, probably in Law and Order, show like that. But he's really great in this film, in Dumb and Dumber. Great comedic timing. He stands up to Johnny Depp here, and Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels in that movie. He gets some of the biggest reaction in this film and in that film. Great character actor. I'd love to see him in more stuff. Here we have sort of the biggest reveal of the film of Ed Wood being a transvestite. And, I really like how open the movie is with this. He just, sort of blatantly goes out. He doesn't show it as a badge of shame or anything. Burning desire, just to tell this story. Movies like Chain Girls. There's some beautiful lighting in this movie. These, there's a few scenes that take place in these little bars, and they're sort of dimly lit and really, really stylish. I think it's really effective. And this soundtrack, which I haven't mentioned, like, this is a movie that doesn't have Danny Elfman uh, doing the score. I think it's the only Tim Burton film that doesn't have Danny Elfman. It has Howard Shore, who, if I were to say who I think, as of right now, is the most effective composer working in Hollywood, you'd have to argue him. Just his Lord of the Rings score alone really showcases, the ability to have music create a world. And this film has a wonderful, wonderful soundtrack. It's one of the strongest elements of the film. And one motif later on we'll see with Bela Lugosi, who we've just been introduced to, is the use of Swan Lake to be his character theme. I just love it. Here's embarking on another bus tour of Dracula. 12 cities in 10 days, as that's conceivable. Here we have the first introduction of Landau, and he really makes this film worth seeing, but he's also sort of the element of controversy as well. A lot of people hate what he's done with that war, and that hatred, I think a lot of it comes from this opening or these dialogue. He causes up a storm, shits and fucks and whatnot. I love, the dynamic between these two. It really, that's really develops the relationship between these two characters perfectly. You have Lugosi here, who's so jaded and, doesn't have any sort of expectations or ideals. He's lost all the romantic love for film and show business. And you see Ed Wood, who naively says, "Oh, Mr. Lugosi, you must live such an exciting life. When's your next film coming out?" And he lives in this little house here. It was actually designed of the house from Plan 9 from Outer Space, which the character walks out of. It actually was Tor Johnson's house. The women prefer the traditional monsters. I think this is an aspect of the Lugosi portrayal in this that's really sort of interesting. There's a few, there's two instances where he talks about it, the sort of sex appeal of Dracula. And the actual Bela Lugosi, he did say this quite a lot, that if you want, that women were his biggest fans, and that the idea of Dracula was so exotic and frightening to them. It's the only reference we get to Lillian Lugosi, who, would have been an interesting character. I see the point of view that some people have about, wishing that there'd be a more faithful adaptation of Bela Lugosi's life brought to the screen. I certainly see that, but this isn't better than getting the job. Oh, that's so cute. You see her sweater is so stretched out from him wearing it. Boris Karloff, Basil Rathbone. I met Bela. Oh, here's the one thing that if we might talk about that the movie sort of loses a little bit of its thing is that the whole pronunciation of Bela and Bella, they all refer to him as Bela Lugosi, and that's, was not how his name was pronounced. It's Bela Lugosi. Oh, I hate this little moment where he's, talking about Bela Lugosi. And the first thing is, yeah, he's a bum, a junkie. I, you know, I guess part of, I don't know, the sort of way you look at Lugosi is that his reputation has sort of evolved over the years. That's actual footage from White Zombie that you're seeing there. I think she's a hoodie. Look at those jokes. I always like listening to uh, Landau's interviews about this film. There's a great one where he talks about how he developed the accent. And, it's not a perfect Lugosi impression by any sense, but I think the way he got at that was actually sort of inspired. He, instead of, trying to get a Hungarian, perfect Hungarian accent, he actually talked to Hungarian actors who were trying to lose theirs. And so what he's doing is an impersonation of a Hungarian Hungarian actor trying to shed the accent. And when when you have trouble shedding the accent, it just appears all the more prevalent. And, that's obviously one of the problems that dogged Lugosi his entire career was his inability to do that. And of course, every film that, this is the saddest period of Lugosi's life, in that he is dealing with his morphine addiction. There's a lot of stories, a lot of rumors. Some people like to exaggerate the whole story and say that he was addicted to harder drugs, or that he was sort of a junkie that only did it to get high. But he actually, this whole thing started as Lugosi suffered several crippling injuries in the First World War. He was shot in the legs, and he had a lot of leg pain. And later in his life, sort of just aging and having all that catch up with him. And so what happened was the doctor prescribed morphine, and Lugosi actually was afraid to start taking it. What happened was that what happens is that you start taking it, and it gradually became dependent on it. And there's stories about him, in the summer stock, people catching him with a needle in his arm. And what actually, if you wanted to do a really faithful adaptation or not adaptation, really faithful to the facts sort of thing. Lugosi's divorce to his wife Lillian plays a big part into it. Lillian actually weaned him off of the morphine, from what I've read, and he went back on it in depression, and increased the dosage to the point where it got him really, really sick around this time. Why would Lugosi want to do a sex change flick? Lugosi. One of the, there's some other stories actually from around here, and I don't know. I don't want to get too much into them, but they're interesting. One thing I would definitely recommend is I always have a few good book recommendations, but I recently read Bela Lugosi, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which, if you're really interested in the facts around this time, then that is the book to go. It's by Gary Rhodes, who is excellent, excellent biographer of Lugosi. Probably knows him more than, gets, those books get into the head of him more than any other out there. And Lugosi's, he wanted to, look at that, sort of have the final word on it. And it's really a great book to recommend because it was written by Richard Sheffield, who, if Richard Sheffield was a friend of Bela Lugosi, a teenage boy who loved him, saw him, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, and sort of, became infatuated with him. And, just one day he has the gumption, him and his buddies, to look up Lugosi in the phone book and, write to him. And they sort of became his friend. He would have them over and he'd tell them stories, and eventually, Richard Sheffield actually was the last one to see Lugosi alive. And he did meet Ed Wood, and the impression I got from the book is that he, I don't know, maybe thought his heart was in the right place, but that he did sort of think there was a little exploitation factor in there as well. But it's really intimately goes into what was happening around this time, and especially sort of the aftermath of Lugosi and his drug abuse. That's how it became open at the time. Yeah, I suppose now's as good a time as any to go into my own personal opinions about the Ed Wood films. I don't like them pretty much at all. I don't. I'm not disparaging anyone who does like them. Obviously they have their fan base, and I think a lot of people who look at them are sort of putting on rose-colored goggles. They just want to look at things in the best way possible. Romantically, think of maybe. I think they're inspired by this movie. They want to think of Ed Wood as this, great dreamer and artist and filmmaker who just didn't have the sort of resources to do it. But the fact is, he is a terrible, terrible screenwriter, Ed Wood. His movies have such plotting and pacing problems, and it, to be frank, they're kind of boring. Like, there's just not enough material or momentum to go through a narrative. I suppose if I were to, asked to choose the most interesting one, it would be Schmuck would like Angora sweaters. I love that line. I suppose if I were to choose the most interesting one, it would be Bride of the Monster, just because it's sort of the most conventional one. And even, Lugosi, he looks awful in that movie. Looks totally sick, like he's having a miserable time being there. But it's the most conventional one, and he does have a good moment in it. And even Glenn or Glenda, which is just so out there. It's like I've heard it sort of called an avant-garde sort of film. That it's just a bunch of ideas and you know I don't know, a lot of gibberish really pointed together, trying to make some thematic sense. And I guess Ed Wood thought it was really sort of poignant, abstract art. Lugosi, he's out there in the movie. We're gonna see the recreation of his scene in it, and like the movie itself has this really sort of monotone narrator. You feel like you're listening Permit Run. Largemouth Studios. I love that. Mr. Lugosi is here. This is one of the most famous sequences in this film. It goes into the sort of the whole Karloff debate. We'll see that soon. But Lugosi's scenes in Glenda, they just come out of nowhere. Like there's no reason for them whatsoever. He has, really, if you're curious, these films are easily accessible enough. I don't know. I don't even recommend them. Just like, if you must see them, then do so. But it's probably a better idea to, like, the beauty of YouTube these days is that there's best of compilations where they handpick the best moments for you to look at. I don't know. Here we have the first, like, sort of hints about his drug abuse, or the next sort of hint. I really think that it'll go. We'll talk about the sort of the cussing and the sort of swearing. Here we have the little squirrely looking guy asking for the autograph. And he talks about how he enjoyed him as Karloff's sidekick in The Invisible Ray. This is just sort of a Hollywood legend come to life. I think it's really here because, I don't know, everyone sort of expects them to be a discussion of Karloff. Yeah, I don't know. There's just not any conclusive. I don't know. From what I've heard, any sort of conclusive about how they feel. I think like this sort of legend. It's unfair to Lugosi to always think of him as being jealous. But despite that, I think in this film it works because you notice that I think like the cussing is a very distinct choice in the screenplay, and I think Landau, realized it and plays it well. He the scenes with the cussing, I think, show Lugosi when he's trying to make up for his insecurities. I don't think it's an accident that the scene comes right after the makeup man powdering up his arms and noticing the tracks from the morphine. I don't think that's a mistake at all. That this whole swearing comes after that, because I think it shows that Lugosi is trying to the Lugosi character is expressing the dissatisfaction with his just with everything. Dolores Fuller, I guess, is the one that sort of gets the bum rush in this movie. They portray her as like very against Ed Wood, and from what I've read, she actually did love him, and she was always someone who I don't know, listened or not listened, but appeared in conventions and stuff. So maybe you could say that it's a little unfair what they did to her. But I think the whole thing about the biopic, or not even the biopic, but the stories about biographies of the character, biographies of well-known people, is that the best thing about them is the fact that they give exposure to these subjects. And so I know people that wouldn't know who Ed Wood was without this movie, and I don't know, like the best thing that really could have happened for Ed Wood and these people around here is this film. I don't know, it's a blessing for them. It really, it's inspired people to pick up some pretty terrible movies, to be frank. Bringing my own movie. Screen classics. I've never heard of them. I don't know them. I'm giving you first crack at my talents. You really need someone like Johnny Depp for this to work. Otherwise, I think this movie could have been just terribly, terribly depressing. These are all actual titles of movies that Ed Wood supposedly wanted to make. The Vampire's Tomb, Ghouls Goes West, Dr. Acula. The whole thing was he could never get funding for any of these movies, and they were all supposed to star Bela Lugosi. I don't like it. Lugosi's all washed up. What else we got? Lugosi's all washed up. like it's just interesting. Like I was going into before about how Lugosi's sort of career reputation. Like around this time, it was before the famous Monsters of Filmland craze that brought interest into these characters again, and like the critical reprisals. There were some reviews written of Dracula that sort of pointed out that it was just campy and that it didn't really take a whole lot of talent on Lugosi's part to play a role, and I think that's sort of where it was in the 50s, and why maybe Lugosi couldn't get parts. Is this an actual? Here's that narrator from the film. Believe that's. I don't think this is footage from the movie, but I think that actually is the narrator. That's the guy I met today. All this has got to be a put on. Wellman's practical jokes. Oh. Yeah, like I was saying, there's a clear divide between the world of Ed Wood and his compatriots in the world, the real filmmaking world. Uh, Opening this weekend, the ads are in Alabama, Indiana, Missouri. It ain't gonna play in LA. Who wants to see this piece of shit? Which movie? God. I just, people, like, he just doesn't take no for an answer, and it's so, it's so interesting it's just so heartwarming on Depp's part. This idea of this artist that just loves telling stories so much, and I love the fact that he actually does refer to them as stories. Later on he says that they're movies that he wanted to see, stories that he wanted people to see, things that he finds interesting, how much he loves them, and the whole movie. Here we have George the Animal Steel as Tor Johnson. He actually doesn't speak in this movie. He's got a voice on him that is just sort of out there. Tor Johnson actually did appear in a number of movies just because he's such a presence. This guy really, really does look like him a lot. It's horrible, ugly looking man there. He's got a face. That's really all you can say about Tor Johnson. He had no real acting talent whatsoever. He's just sort of fun and goofy looking. And that happens sometimes. People work in movies who, are just there because they have an appearance. He's actually one of the reasons I don't really like, well, he's one of the reasons why, I don't know, Bride of the Monster is sort of a goofy, boring movie, is because you're asking him, Ed Wood was naive enough to think that he could carry a lot of that movie, sort of, he's asking this guy to be a Karloff, and maybe like couldn't do it. I like when the movies shoot. Hello, Warners, Mr. Feldman. Supposedly, this episode did happen in real life. That he did, or at least, as far as I could tell from the real Ed Wood, um, who was, he is one of the interviewees in the Man Behind the Cape, which I think is the definitive Lugosi book because it was written when so many of the figures were actually still alive and could speak for it. But you do sort of get the feeling that maybe Wood himself uh, was embellishing things a little bit. Uh, these two episodes are actually in the book. Here's a reference to an actual portrait Lugosi had in his living room. There's this huge portrait he had commissioned by himself by a Hungarian uh, artist, and it's actually really, really impressive. Um, there's pictures of his last apartment, which, was like he couldn't afford much by the very end. And you see this, these portraits, the portrait hanging in the background. It's so, impressive, and, man who has so much power, and just seeing it in that final apartment, like there's a really sort of tragic photo. Actually, they had people rush to take pictures as they were leaving his body, taking his body out of the apartment, and it's there. It got lost for a very long time. Lugosi's last wife, Hope Lugosi, actually donated it, and there's all sorts of rumors about where it might have ended up. It actually, I think, was bought by one of the drummer from Metallica. His name escapes me, but he's a really huge Lugosi fan. I think he even had like a huge screening of the Black Cat in the LA area, which I would have loved to have seen. But he has that portrait now. And there's another portrait Lugosi had that also was in that picture. Uh, yeah, it was actually in that picture. It's a nude sort of painting he had commissioned of Clara Bow, the famous Hollywood starlet. I don't know if she posed for it now. There's a lot of urban legends about it, if it's actually her or what. But Lugosi, loved this portrait for some reason, and he kept it with him. Like, even when his son was growing up and living in the house, it was in the living room. His wife had to put up with it. It's just one of the eccentricities of the character. Here we have his appearance on the Red Skelton Show. It's not called the Red Skelton Show here, but it actually did occur. It's very similar to what happened here. I actually have seen some footage from it recently. Uh, I think it was released pretty recently. I don't know if it was lost or whatnot, but it was a part of the Red Skeleton Complete Collection. Lon Chaney Jr. is in the episode too. And one of the bits I actually saw on it was actually pretty good. Lugosi had some good comedic timing there. He was into it. But part of it also was because I guess his hearing wasn't very good. There's a famous story about him at the House of Wax premiere. I sort of mentioned it in the Murders of the Room Work commentary because he did actually have gorilla there. Talking about my towels. This isn't referenced as Red Skeleton. Uh, Actually, Karloff appeared on the show a number of times too, and they're actually close friends. Um, I sort of going back. I want to say about the House of Wax premiere. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. It happens sometimes. But the House of Wax premiere, he actually had some trouble hearing in his later years. And what happened was they said, "Oh, we'll do answer the questions, but they have to be in a preset order." And so Lugosi spent a lot of time practicing them, and then they asked him out of order, and so he was answering the wrong questions. You know, just sort of the humiliation. I don't know. He never really did well with that sort of improvisation. Um, it's just, some actors don't. I don't think it speaks anything that about Lugosi, not having talent or anything, but some actors just don't do well with improvisation. They take a lot of time to get into character. And so I could see why a show like Red Skeleton, a live sort of comedy show wouldn't have been up his alley. But I think, actually take a look at the footage. I think, the legend, has sort of become so much that you forget that he actually, it's maybe aside from some of the moments, he holds up, and it holds up that little bit. I was surprised. I guess I made it up. Oh, shit. He's played by Jeffrey Jones, who's very famous in the early 90s. Obviously from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he's in Beetlejuice. He was a little Tim Burton favorite. He's also in Sleepy Hollow. I think he gets pretty memorably bumped off in that movie by the Headless Horseman. The Brown Derby Restaurant. Here's where we see Ed Wood has gained that little mustache. A heartbreaking romance. Quite a specimen. The ad will be the biggest moneymaker of all time. I love, I don't know, like this Griswold character. He's fun. He actually did. Well, I shall certainly consider it. Good night, Ed. Keep in touch. Would it make a nickel? Here we have Juliet Landau, who is actually Martin Landau's daughter. She's in this movie as sort of weird sort of character. I forget her name. Loretta King is her name, and she is in Bride of the Monster. She wasn't a very good actress. She, Loretta King actually was at Lugosi's funeral. Just sort of interesting going into the discussion of these actual people, thinking about their legacy, but she is there. I read the guest book, and it's sort of interesting, seeing these actual people there. The real Loretta King isn't very good, obviously, in Bride of the Monster. There's some, I don't know if it's her or, the fact that the movie was so low budget, but she just seems very, I don't know, like unkempt in that movie. She doesn't have the sort of eloquence of the female star. there's a lot of shots of her where they really Ed Wood does a horrible job of sort of capturing her in the way I imagine like you would hope. And I don't know, it's her bad acting or Ed Wood's bad directing, but she's pretty memorably bad in that film. Sounds kind of small. Female parts, secretary, file cabinet lady. I sure like to play her. Those fake teeth are perfect. He really wears them well. And Johnny Depp, just like the smile he has on his face. Like people with them, probably wouldn't smile all that much because they look so fake. But it's just one of the great character choices. Like, there were plenty of other parts. File clerk. Oh my god. Oh. This actually does sort of look like the laboratory from Bride of the Monster. One of the most fascinating sort of factoids that I've read about the filming of Bride of the Monster is that a lot of the sequences for Bela's laboratory were actually shot in a news studio that did the local television news. Dark green one. One or two scenes a day. 2030. Here's one of the sort of the biggest historical, or not historic, creative liberties of the film. Um, the idea that these sort of like flubs. Oh, it's not Lugosi who does it. It's the Lobel character. I'm sorry. This is actually really funny. There's quite a few moments like this in Bride of the Monster that stick out glaringly. We'll see that he moves towards the door, and you see the you're not that upset. Keep walking. You gotta get through that door. He's doing the part in the exact same place. I don't know if that moment is actually in there, but there's a lot of scenes like that in Bride of the Monster, and these flubs that just clearly show the ineptitude of everyone involved. Like boom mics is probably the movie where there's the most boom mics sticking into the scenes than anything I've ever seen. I mean, you even hear about that happening in great movies. I think, I don't know, Star Wars or Kubrick movie. I heard you could see a boom mic in them. But in Bride of the Monster, it's over the top. There's a scene that's unforgettable where you have the cop character driving around, and he's it's like he's in the forest, and it's way out there, like they go over the top and how long this sequence is with the guy reversing, and he knocks over a log and it rolls out of frame. And in here you see Wood smile and say, "Oh, it's realism. Lobo would have to struggle with that problem every day." But in here, in this film, in actuality, I think it was because he couldn't afford more than one take, and he just, couldn't. Uh, he just couldn't frame the scenes the right way in the beginning. Now I need the other 60,000. What other 60,000? Give to me. I just sort of reading about what Johnny Depp based the character, his characterization of Ed Wood off of. I think a lot of it, comes from sort of a salesman approach. A lot of people say it's John Lovitz, and I've heard different things. Casey Kasem, Johnny Depp. That's one of the interesting things about Johnny Depp is that he does like other actors, from what I've heard, and he obviously famously based his characterization of Captain Jack Sparrow off of Keith Richards, um, but uh, but this one I've heard a few rumors or whatnot. Casey Kasem, and I definitely see that like that sort of smooth disc jockey kind of salesman and I actually, another thing I heard is that he tried to watch Ronald Reagan speeches because to get like sort of the naivete and optimism. That would actually be kind of funny too. I don't know. I like actors that do that. Um, I really do. I think, it's, I mean, there's one thing where you could say that it's just, a poor imitation, but uh, well, it's one thing if you say it's a poor imitation, but if you borrow nuances from actors, and it really can be a great tribute. I hate Sweeney Todd. I really hate that movie, and generally a lot of the Johnny Depp, Tim Burton collaborations, I don't think are very good. I think they just sort of became. I got a bad feeling about this. Uh, I think a lot of the Tim Burton, Johnny Depp collaborations, they sort of became stagnant. They never said no to one another. Then if you just collaborate so long that you don't challenge. But going back to Sweetie Todd, he actually did say he based a lot of that characterization off of Lon Chaney, and good for him. There's Rance Howard as this old. I always like him. He appeared in these sort of roles. He was in Nebraska recently. He's great in this film also. And you're too vague. I'm gonna make you happy. Moving in with a big explosion. But it ends with Devorna falling into the pit. Not anymore. The two. He's a good boy. And something tells me he'd make a hell of a leading man. Anything can happen. Today's a usual gang of misfits and dope addicts are here. Just stay away from the old windows. his dad gave me 50 grand. The mark of quality. There's another scene that I really remember in uh, there was another scene I really remember from Bride of the Monster with Florida King, where she walks through the door and like her jacket and purse get caught on I don't know, like caught on something. They sort of are being held back. It's really kind of comical. And, like that's really all you could get from an Ed Wood film. I don't know. I'd only really watch Bride of the Monster again in its entirety if it were hosted by like a horror host. It's tailor made for tailor made for uh, tailor made for horror hosts, or tailor made for shows like Mystery Science Theater. Yeah, this scene actually plays exactly like that in the real film. I don't know. Always happy to help a little larceny. This, I don't know. I wonder how true this story is about supposedly stealing an octopus. I know it was made for a John Wayne film, and they didn't have the motor to make it run. I think they ran. I don't know. I think this story is Lobo will fix it, good boy. I think this story is a little too. I don't know. I don't know the truth of it, but it's really one of the more memorable pieces of Bride of the Monster. That the mechanical octopus doesn't work at all. It's not Lugosi fighting it in the movie, no. And even we've killed him. The octopus doesn't look that good, actually. That's one thing you could say. The octopus in Ed Wood, or I mean, Bride of the Monster, doesn't look as good as the one in Ed Wood. That's pretty much all it is, though. Is That's pretty much all it is. Like, it looks like this in the movie. The octopus just sits down there. This actually might be my favorite sequence in the whole movie. This piece with Lugosi and how he deals with the octopus here. Actually, one of the this is somewhat based in truth, that there was a night shoot that like Lugosi had a whole ordeal from what I've heard about how he took that medicine, and one of Ed Wood's co-stars drove him over to his apartment while he administered it to himself, and I think that's sort of based in truth. Motor when I was on the ceiling. Where we have Lugosi or Landau actually coming into the scene. Let's shoot this fucker. It's kind of. This moment is actually kind of. I don't know. You might say it's a little bit controversial. I don't know. I don't know. Controversial is the word I'm looking for, but it's Lugosi's one chance to to sort of disparage what he's doing. He talks about uh, his monologue about Frankenstein, and like I think if the movie had a moment, uh, if the movie had a moment where it really, really, really captures sort of the tragedy of Lugosi. He's talking about turning down Frankenstein. The part wasn't sexy enough, too degrading for a big star like me. I have 25 scenes to shoot tonight. Don't let me start. But that is the tragedy of Lugosi. I know we talk about this all the time on this commentary about Lugosi and what might have happened with Frankenstein. And even if, if that story even is true, that he actually did turn down the part, or if he was fired from it. But it just didn't, it just wasn't, it just shows the fact that Lugosi, for that brief period of time was sort of on top of the world, a Dracula, and he had this, promise of more success with this Frankenstein project, and the fact that he, um, the fact that he does it, the fact that he, doesn't do Frankenstein, and that he's forced to do all these projects because he's afraid he'll never work. And then, they degrade in quality is sort of the tragedy of Lugosi. And I like that moment in this film. I think Landau really handles it pretty well. Here we have the filming of maybe, and it's shot verbatim, or this little monologue is verbatim from Bride of the Monster, and it might be the only little bit of good writing that Ed Wood ever did. Lines. I'll have no problem remembering. It's probably the only bit of good writing that Ed Wood ever did. Maybe it was even Alex Gordon who actually wrote this little monologue where he talks about home. I have no home. Like people, audiences and Lugosi fans like to, put their own significance on things. And, in some ways, this little monologue has been compared to a little bit of a autobiographical sort of spin on Lugosi legend and triumph that, he's talking about home, and he's sort of talking about being in exile, and that could mean any sort of number of things. Lugosi leaving Hungary, whereas exile from doing projects with actual artistic merit to these terrible Ed Wood movies. And, Lugosi, it's a moment of, it's a moment of vintage Lugosi, probably the closest thing you'll get to it in that film. And, you know, there's a lot of talk about what Lugosi's actual, what you consider his last movie. He is actually very sick. He's actually sick. And he was worried that, from what I heard, that he couldn't even memorize the lines. And there's a lot of stories about, Lugosi getting ovations on sets. Heard stories from Donnie Dunnigan that the cast of Son of Frankenstein was very enamored with him, but I heard that he actually did get uh, applause and a big reaction on set of Bride of the Monster. And, yeah, I don't know if it was the last scene or not, but, um, you could actually, feel proud, at least, about that one little scene. It, it's I don't know, a little bit of polish on that turd of a movie. Here's another choice that I really like about this movie that goes all out with the cigarette smoke. The fact that the lighting really filters in the air as well as becomes so prevalent and sort of misty. That little guy there looks like, or the organist there sort of looks like Karloff. You get the feeling that um, he reminds me a lot of Karloff and um, Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer Boris Karloff, or even Lugosi and Dr. Shindow. I don't know. This is kind of unfortunate. Maybe the people who are Dolores Fuller. People claim that this movie is unfair. I don't know. Maybe they have a point with Dolores Fuller. Maybe they do. I don't even get why they even think that was funny. You people are insane. From what I've heard, Dolores Fuller actually, was did like the movie a lot, even though they portrayed her. I don't know, maybe not the best. She, you know, good for her if that was the case. I don't know the full story, but good for her. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. You definitely get the feeling that um, you get the feeling with some of these films, or with this one, that it's so out there and so stretches sort of the realm of reality. It's a fairy tale. Like, would this have been as effective or effective at all had it just been made about made it like fictional? Like, they do sort of need some of these names, especially the name of Lugosi, to give this movie credibility. But that being said, this is Lisa Marie, who was Tim Burton's girlfriend for a really long time. She's really good in this movie. It's the biggest role she ever got in one of his films. This, supposedly, going back to what I said, these moments where he rescues him while he's in drug days, this moment, at least according to the real Ed Wood, really did happen. And, it sounds a little too theatrical to be true. Um, Especially just reading the recount of it, just reading sort of the um, reading the recollection of it in Bob Creamer's book, The Man Behind the Cape. Um, it ends almost. It ends almost too perfectly, because Ed Wood recollects that he talked him out of this funk by suggesting that they start up a nightclub act, and it reads like a movie, and so you sort of wonder if it actually did happen. I've heard Ed Wood, this is secondhand, so I don't know how true it is, but I heard Ed Wood, the poor guy was a really mean-spirited, bitter drunk at the end, from what I've heard. And when Bob Creamer digs him up, isn't alive much longer after that book is published. Ed Wood dies at about 52. He drinks himself to death. And, I heard that he was a mean drunk to Bob Creamer and went on, would go into mood swings. And one time he yelled at him saying, "I should have written the book." I read that on the classic horror film board, that story. So I don't know. It's like, secondhand. But formaldehyde straight up or on the rocks. That's one thing about this movie. It has a lot of fun with things. There's a lot of jokes. You might say that they might be at the expense of someone if you were so inclined. But I think that the moments with Bela Lugosi's drug addiction are all handled very respectfully. You are never, you never laugh at Lugosi for being addicted to drugs. And Landau, gives this a lot of weight, and he acts really, he's really sort of tragic. There's a story about Landau getting into the part. In actuality, this did, as you'll see in the movie, this did sort of become a freak show for Lugosi. The press were interested in him again, and they were very, very exploitive about it. They chose to see it, I don't know. I mean, they chose to see it in a way that, would sell newspapers. He was the first major star or recognizable celebrity to admit to having a drug addiction. And since he was so broke at the time, he asked to be committed to a mental hospital. And they actually did, the court transcript of the judge, he actually said it was commendable that he wanted to come over this drug addiction. And I don't know, it is sort of commendable of Lugosi to admit that he had a problem and that he tried to overcome it in a way, that he must have realized that that this stuff would have occurred. That this um, sort of negative publicity would have occurred. And this is one of the moments where I don't think the movie gets it right. They sort of, have this doctor sort of being uncaring, and, they talk about how he isn't covered by insurance. But, Lillian, I wonder if that's reference to Lugosi's wife, maybe. Here's the moment I was talking about. There's a picture of Lugosi. He looked awful in this picture. Uh, and Landau said it was his big inspiration for his characterization of Lugosi. He looks like he's on death's door in this picture, and it was sort of what he. There's no such thing as bad press, Eddie. Unfortunately, I don't know. Lugosi, you get the feeling that he thought that this was going to be maybe a way for him to make a comeback. The fact that he admits to being addicted to drugs and that he was sick, and that maybe someone would feel sorry for him. Maybe that his name was out there, that people would be interested in him, maybe. I don't know. There's another great photo of Lugosi, like some of the co-stars from Bride of the Monster visited the hospital, to sort of cheer him up, and they gave him a script. I think it was for the Ghoul Goes West, this goofy Ed Wood movie that would never ever get made. And he looks like it's kind of an inspiring picture, just this showing this guy who's obviously very sick, very much on the, very much, near the end of his life. You get the feeling that death is hanging over him a little bit, and he looks so confident in his ability to make a comeback. There's a great biography episode on Bela Lugosi, and it's on YouTube. It's called Bela Lugosi, Hollywood Dark Prince, and I think it really describes Lugosi really sort of perfectly. That he died never losing faith in the ability to resurrect his career, and here, this is what I'm saying. Like, jeez. This haunted house here, which is so, stylish and over the top. I think you have to go in looking at this movie for what it is. And these are great choices here. Now, to tell you something I've never told any girl on a first date. I like to wear women's clothing. Women's clothes. I like the fact that they really go all out and say that he's not gay or that there's any sort of subtext about this. I don't know. It's not all that important to the character or not, but it just I don't know. It shows. It just shows that this character, he's sort of eccentric and comfortable in his own skin, and that he really, there's no insult that can really get to him. I don't know, maybe this was another moment that's sort of unfair to Dolores Fuller, and that the only thing that makes her the perfect match is that she's accepting of his transvestitism. But who knows? This actually did happen, that Lugosi tried to go to a private hospital for treatment to his drug addiction, and SAG uh, denied him being covered through the insurance, and just just like one of the tragic ironies about Hollywood and how it spits you up and chews you up and spits you out. Lugosi, SAG wouldn't have been as strong if it wasn't for Lugosi. He wasn't a founding member of it, but he was one of its fiercest promoters when it first started. He very much believed in unionizing artists. That's always one of the things I've always really admired about Lugosi, is that he cared about actors as people, and it was a large part of his background. He left Hungary because of the fact that he had joined the Communist Party, Bela as the commissar of the theater. Here's the little explanation for the Plan 9 footage. And, if you actually see Plan 9, the footage that's incorporated for that is a lot more than just this little sequence of Lugosi walking down this little front porch. It was footage that was trying to be used to go to the backers in order to get financing for another movie to be made. And it was the last footage ever shot. It was shot the summer that he died, like just mere months beforehand. And he looks awful in it. And it's incorporated terribly into Plan 9 from Outer Space. Lugosi looks terribly sick in it, and it's like really disrespectful. I think if you want to talk about exploitation of Bela Lugosi, I think putting that footage in the movie was an act of exploitation. They just how they edited it in there. Oh gosh, they have a lot of jokes at, I guess, Tor Johnson's expense too. But I don't know. He's a trooper, Tor Johnson. It's kind of comical how they talk about him like he's a global good boy. Ooh. There's actually talk, which I thought was kind of interesting, where Alex Gordon, who was sort of, the agent figure that Ed Wood, sort of is portrayed as in this movie, tried to reunite Lugosi with Karloff for one final project. And, you talk about Lugosi and his sort of opinions on Karloff, but Karloff supposedly said, "Oh, do people really want to see us together again?" And there's a really, really interesting story told by Hope Lugosi, who is Lugosi's last wife, who is not dramatized in the movie, but she, I think. If they wanted to make an interesting movie about this time, she would have been a really, really interesting character. But Lugosi wakes up in the middle of the night and says that Karloff is here, and they're going to make a movie together. And, just hallucinating. Karloff actually did send roses to the funeral parlor. He isn't there, as a lot of urban legends say. Lugosi's funeral. This is the last scene Landau has in the movie, and yeah, it does sort of capture that optimism that even that even Wood, the character Ed Wood, I'm not talking about the historical Lugosi, sorry, going back and forth. There has to be a distinction made between the historical Ed Wood and the historical Bela Lugosi. But this scene I really like because it shows that this Ed Wood character has gotten to Lugosi. He's come a long way since the beginning of the film, and he has faith in himself again. And he's talking about feeling wanted, and getting this last great monologue. If Lugosi had only lived a few more years, I think he would have gotten uh, um, some respect that he really should have deserved. He misses the Shock Theater package by a year. I think Shock Theater is introduced in 1957, and what that was a package of horror films, all the classic Universal Pictures finally brought back to TV for people to watch, the rights to them, and the local stations would show it. It's the birth of the Shock Theater. It's the name of actually a lot of old-fashioned horror hosts who are actually called Shock Theater. But mm, but if Lugosi had lived just one more year almost, he probably would have been able to appreciate the fans, a whole new legion of them that really, really cared about him. This is the most famous, kind of morbid, I don't know, story about Lugosi is that he was buried in his Dracula cape. It's actually kind of tragic and sort of ironic in a way, that this man who spent so much time trying to, move past that, like it's forever sealed as his legacy. For all the good and bad, Lugosi certainly, you know, loved the part as much as he hated it. It always provided him with, yeah, it always provided him with a legacy in part, but it, definitely limited what he could do. This is a beautiful moment. This last footage of Lugosi and Wood watching it over and over again with Swan Lake playing, and it's Swan Lake played with a distinctly Hungarian sort of feel to it. It almost, I think it says something that, the whole idea about kind of achieving the immortality of film. And you remember Lugosi in the sense of his most famous part in Dracula. Here we have the beginnings. The film is pretty evenly divided between his three films. And we have the sort of the little exploration into Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is, I don't know if it's the worst movie of all time, but it is one of the worst films. Oh, there's Bela's dogs there in the background. That's the actual poster for Bride of the Monster. More horrifying than Dracula and Frankenstein is the little subtitle on it. You gotta admire Ed Wood in some ways, or his marketing team, that they tried to market that movie as a um, as a as a sort of take on those old classic monsters. He's got a bust of Tora Johnson in the background. That's kind of cute too. I've heard rumors that Ed Wood wanted to get Lon Chaney Jr. for Plan 9 from Outer Space. I don't know if they were true or not, or maybe they were and he just couldn't afford them, or that the agent didn't work out. But that would have been so unfortunate. Like, I would have been depressed if he got both Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney Jr. to be in his movies. We have a star, Bela Lugosi. I heard he passed on. Yes, he did. Doesn't look like much. Mr. Reynolds, this is the acorn that will grow a great oak. That's actually, if you want to talk about exploiting people who aren't here to defend themselves, like, the more I think about what the real Ed Wood did with Plan 9 from outer space, I like this scene. They're looking for Lugosi's double to finish his scenes, and then they choose a little Asian guy. He's just not going to work. Like when Bela played Fu Manchu. Paulo was Carl. You're gonna have to try hard. Yeah, just like the transvestites in the extra scene. Both picked the most dreary looking people there. Vampira was really the first horror hostess, I guess. And she was the one that made it all really popular. Obviously there's a lot of comparisons to be made to Elvira. I've heard that Elvira actually, might have plagiarized the part. There was actually a lawsuit. I seem to recall that she lost. I think there was enough difference between the two. It's too bad there's no real footage. At least I haven't found any from that Vampira show. But there's some pictures. She really wore the makeup really well. That real Vampira. Dr. Tom, who is the Lugosi double, he actually doesn't. I like that he doesn't look very much like Lugosi, except for maybe the eyebrows. And the real guy didn't look very much like Lugosi at all either. The real Dr. Tom didn't really look very much like Lugosi either. They the whole scenes with that character in Plan 9 are just so out there. He doesn't do anything. You have this footage of Lugosi in the beginning of the picture. Which is just this leftover stock footage. And it doesn't match very well just because that graveyard set is so ridiculous in that movie. Well, they recreate it really, really well here. I like this guy a lot. This reverend actor. Let me pull up his name. Ed Bellamy. Oh, I can't. I don't know. He's in Silence of the Lambs too. He's a great actor. Or is he? Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. Oh this is a great sequence with the Buddy Breckenridge character. Yeah, sure. He rejects Satan and all his promises, sure. And I love this little scene here where they're talking about, why he can't, what are you doing, with this monster movie. It's not a monster movie, it's a supernatural thriller. How neat is that? This is a great sequence of, showing that about the how this movie sort of takes place in its own sort of world. It's really kind of neat. You see her. G.D. Spradlin was the guy I was thinking of. He wasn't in Silence of the Lambs. I was thinking of. He wasn't in Silence of the Lambs. I was thinking of someone else, but he is in Godfather Part 2. I'm sorry, I sort of screwed up, but he's brilliant as Senator Greery in Godfather 2, the corrupt Nevada senator who the Corleones blackmail. He's got a really great voice. For Christ's sakes, but Mr. Wood strikes us as very inflammatory. Change it to plant diet from outer space. That's ridiculous. This graveyard set, I mean, it's like perfect. I've seen sort of horror kind of plays and haunted houses that look more realistic than this graveyard set. This really sort of makes the movie. They actually give the dialogue to George Johnson. He's unintelligible. I don't know. You can almost say that, this scene, in the depiction of this flamboyantly gay guy goes into a lot of stereotypes. You're the ruler of the galaxy. Show a little taste. Goes into some stereotypes. But it's fun seeing, Bill Murray, have fun being a silly Bill Murray. I can't help it. I like it. Even here, he doesn't look like Lugosi. Even here, when they even got the wig on him. And this actually, the set looks a little more real than the one in the actual movie, because I distinctly remember that little mausoleum being made of cardboard. And one of the plot points in the movie, they talk about resurrecting the dead, and she's the wife of the Vampira is the wife of the Lugosi character. Gosh, I think he's even just called the old man. And they're buried in separate graves, just like it's like, oh, it's old superstition. It's old superstition that they wanted to be buried separately or something like that. It's been a while since I've seen it. It's been a while because I just haven't really felt compelled. Do you know anything about the art of film production? Well, I like to think so. There's some discussion to be had about bad movies, and what movies are bad and what makes a bad movie good. I don't know. I think Bela Lugosi made plenty of good bad movies. I don't know if I'll ever get to do a commentary on it. I probably won't, just because there's not a whole lot to discuss about it. But The Devil Bat is a great bad movie. Because it not only is it silly, but it uh gosh, what was I gonna say? Not only is it silly, but it respects it had like everyone in it is fully in it. And, you know, you could say that about you could say that maybe about these movies too, but there's a lot of dedication in that. And Lugosi, you know, even in some of the moments in Bride of the Monster, you know, that monologue being one, Lugosi was forced to do a lot of shit, and you know he treated it like it was all Hamlet, and that I think is why he, you know, even more so than Dracula, I think that's why he was a great actor. But you know, you have to have some entertainment value from bad movies. You really do, because you know there you can ironically like a movie. Um, you can ironically like a movie, sure. You know, as long as it, I think as long as it, you know, the pacing of it's good enough, and as long as there's a momentum to it. Because a lot of movies, I think, you know, what you fail to realize, a lot of these bad horror movies um, are bad because they're boring. That they don't have enough material to hold up a plot. So many of them are. So many of them have a monster in them, and they just don't know what to do with them until later moments. You know, like they exploit all their terror at once, and then it's all just about, you know, padding. And there's a lot of padding in Ed Wood's movies. Here's Orson Welles, who's sort of the other figure in there. I don't even know if the stories about him really admiring Orson Welles are all that true. It Will financing Don Quixote. It's kind of fun, you know. They reference actual Orson Welles projects, and Vincent D'Onofrio is playing Orson Welles there, and uh, he actually looks a great deal like Orson Welles. But I guess Tim Burton hated his voice. They actually had Maurice LaMarche dub it over. Want Charlton Heston to play a Mexican. That's kind of cute. I where I had total control, Kane. You hate it. There's just something, I love this last sequence because it you know, it just goes so much into the love of movies. You know, uh, the the best thing about this movie, I think, aside from Landau's performance, which you know I think does have a touching tribute to Lugosi, but this ending and this theme of, you know, being internally optimistic is so brilliant, and it just hits a crescendo at the very end. It seems like a lot of it I've gone into sort of the historical discussion, and I honestly didn't mean to. It's just like sort of find that stuff interesting. But I think this movie, you know, Tim Burton's, obviously the style of it is very good. And, you know, like, you know, the criticism I had about Burton, you know, and that he's dealing with bad characters, I think when he comes to this moment, he has a character that has an arc, this Ed Wood. And, you know, what better arc to have than, you know, striving to fight for artistic integrity and fighting for your visions. And, you know, like, the fact that it's Plan 9 when it comes to this. Plan 9, which, you know, for some reason is considered the worst movie of all time. It's just so perfect, you know. And, right, Plan 9 is a good. There's a lot of stock footage in Plan 9, a lot of stock footage in Bride of the Monster, too, with the octopus. one of the things I wish they sort of did is Plan 9 has a really goofy sort of pseudo kind of Cold War commentary in it. You know, you think Ed Wood, like, I think Ed Wood, you know, you look at this movie and, uh, what was it, Glenn or Glenda, that he really thought he was, I think, he had delusions of being really, really intelligent. Um, I think misguided delusions. I think in Plan 9, he sort of thought he was making a movie in like Invasion of Body Snatchers. You're stupid, stupid. Stupid, stupid. Oh gosh, that's the best scene from Plan 9, where they're talking about their little plan there. The real Griswold has no stage presence at all. He's the Jeffrey Jones is a great improvement over him. Future events will affect you in the future. You know, it ends on his own terms. Like, the movie ends with Ed Wood fully embracing the fantasy of the scenario, fully embracing the fantasy of it. You know, that he, you know, you don't get to see, you don't get to see the inevitable downfall, because the fact is Ed Wood, after Lugosi died, doesn't have much of a career. He still is working in things, but he's writing like really terrible pornography. He was involved in a movie called Orgy of the Dead, which actually has Griswold in it. And it's sort of unfortunate, but you know, like, even knowing that, I think it makes the ending to this film all the more effective. You know, you can sort of see him as getting that one last shot. And, you know, like, this is the only time where the worlds intersect. Like, the audience loves him. And, you know, like, they all seem to be on board. You know, you gotta award this character. The odds are so stacked against them. And, you know, hopelessly so, but, you know, these kind of goofy characters like this are, you know, you can't help but love him. He's lovable, but he's definitely a huge loser. It's for Bela. Heard that Johnny Depp actually did buy one of the houses that was Bela Lugosi had lived in. Oh yeah, the Tor Johnson. The gravestones are like the ones in the beginning of this film. I like that little Griswold takes a sip from his flask. That's kind of cute. This is some of the finest acting ever on Johnny Depp's part. You argue about him going over the top and that terrible narration, but it's all him reacting, and it so relays this character so perfectly. How happy he is, and, you know, just, you know, the wide-eyed sort of optimism, and it just this moment here where he. Or he says, "This is it. This is the one I'll be remembered for." Yeah, and actually in the movie, look, like he walks out. You know, this little scene which could have been very poetic on its own, and, you know, very sort of tragic. And he walks out into the street. You hear a scream that sounds nothing like Lugosi. That actually happened. They don't even have the courtesy to show that. In the audience, you think that maybe they're enthralled, but it could just as easily be disgusted. This is it. This is the one I'll be remembered for. I don't know. Is this like the ultimate joke or insult to the real Ed Wood? Because, who knows? It is the ultimate joke or insult. I don't know. I think it's more than the real Ed Wood probably deserves, because he probably wasn't all. This story probably wasn't all that interesting to begin with, but it's so. It's. I don't know. It's whimsical and magical, and I think it just even though it doesn't show Hollywood in the best of light, I think it shows, or the Hollywood industry in the best light. I think it shows movies in the best way possible. It shows them as being dreams, and that, I think, is why this movie is Tim Burton's masterpiece. It'd be interesting to see when Ed Wood's movies are rediscovered. Monster nudity films, when Ed Wood's movies were rediscovered, because he like his movies were obviously huge critical and financial flops when they released. Nobody really saw them, and it must have been around home video or maybe revival, public domain, showing on television, and obviously Lugosi's name added something to them. That is actually true about Lugosi. This little end note with all these things. Lugosi's memorabilia now does outsell Karloff's. And I think time has been Bela Lugosi's best friend. It's just with the technology and his movies being more accessible than ever, that really has helped his legacy. And I think this movie has too. You can argue that it's maybe a very negative portrayal about a very negative portrayal of Lugosi. That it shows him with the chihuahuas and the cussing, and maybe that's not what the real man was. But I think it's very faithful to the spirit of Lugosi. This artist who very much wanted to keep his dignity and wanted to resurrect his career. Landau obviously famously won an Academy Award for playing Lugosi in this film. And the great irony and sad thing is Lugosi himself never came close to it. Just watching that acceptance speech, you could tell Landau really was saving his biggest thank you for Lugosi himself, and the infamous Academy Award orchestra played him off. I think I think Landau said afterwards, or it was written in a review of the film, that the Oscar might have gone to Landau, but its shadow went to Bela Lugosi. And I think that's very appropriate. Above anything else, I think this movie, despite its silliness, despite its quirkiness, very much does have a sort of love for the people, even though it is sort of fictional and sort of goofy. I think it's done with the best intentions. that is the commentary look at Ed Wood, and I'm sort of glad I got it out of the way. I've always been meaning to. It's been on my mind recently, just reading about it, and it's a movie that I think uh, just my generation of monster fans and film fans have really taken up as their own. And, as long as it gets people to look at Bela Lugosi, I say that this movie should never die. Until next time, we will see you, and I hope you guys enjoyed this commentary.